All right. Great. So maybe I think we have time as people are trickling in. If people who are joining the call want to introduce themselves. My name is Claire Richards. I am an assistant professor of nursing at Washington State University and co-chair of the research forum along with Jessica. Jessica, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jessica LeClaire, and I'm an assistant professor with the University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Nursing, and I'm the other co-chair for this forum. And if anyone wants to pop off and just introduce yourself before we get started, as we welcome people, we can do that now.
Hey everyone, I'm Hannah. Sorry my camera is off today. It's been one of those days, but I am the Director of Member Engagement and Professional Education here with the Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environments and the lead staff person for the research forum. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you, Hannah. If you prefer, feel free to um, like introduce yourself in the chat, or you can, you know, unmute yourself and be brave. It's always like that first unmute is like the scariest one.
See, that's one of the reasons why we utilize polls, anonymous polls, so that shy people can express their opinions. Yep, yep. Hi, Aritza. Nice to meet you.
I'm not sure what ODU is.
Is it Old Dominion University?
I see I'm a West Coast ignorant of the East Coast.
Right. Welcome. All right, I think you can probably get started, Catherine.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so very much for having us today. This is going to be a different session. This is going to be a really interactive session. We'll get to experiment with a climate model. And just before I dive in, so just quick intro. We're Climate Interactive. We are a small nonprofit based mainly in the US, but we do have a few people in Europe and one person in Argentina. How we actually reach scale globally. So about 500,000 people have been through a workshop that you're about to experience with us in a moment. And we do that by training a network of ambassadors. And our ambassadors are business leaders, retired people. We have healthcare professionals. Andrew Garman is a professor at Rush, does teaches classes on healthcare administration. He's one of our ambassadors. And so we've trained these 950 people globally to use the model. They've taken our training, they've run a number of workshops, we've certified them as good to go, be out there, active in the community, and they run on average between 4 and 6 workshops a day, every day. And we also have a long-standing collaboration with MIT, which also gives us a little bit of that heft and international presence and access to the corridors of power. US Congress, we've been there several times, California State Senate, different legislatures, business leaders as well, investors, all the way to sometimes we engage with youth and Boy Scouts. And so really the applicability of the model that I'm about to show is pretty much anyone over the age of 14 or 15. We pretty much work with everyone across every single industry and sector. The reason why I'm here today, and I lead partnerships at Climate Interactive, so we have a number of partnerships with obviously these ambassadors, but also with academic institutions. About 250 higher education classes deploy our simulators across the board, including healthcare. And we also have collaborations with industry groups and risk professionals. And anyway, a lot of different organizations. I'm a recovering accountant by training, but learning to use this model actually helped me pivot into climate work. So I'm a really, really big fan of En-ROADS, just from a personal perspective, and with any sort of job seekers, I'd advocate that they take out training because it gives you the vocabulary and the systems thinking around climate change. So without further ado, I will share my screen, and because we have interactive in the name, so this is the model En-ROADS, which you're going to be utilizing, but because we have interactive in the name, we will start with a poll. So there's two ways you can do this. I, in the chat, just dropped a link to the polling software. You don't have to introduce yourself. You can click, or you can actually, this is probably the easiest way to do this. You can scan this with your phone, this QR code. I'm going to activate this poll. So essentially, as I said, click skip when you get there. You don't need to introduce yourself. It'll take you to this poll. And the question I'd like to ask you is, which health impact of climate change are you most concerned about? And I have a few options here for you. Just the one vote. So air pollution, labor losses from extreme heat, so loss of productivity, deaths from extreme heat, crop nutrient decrease, vector-borne diseases, and then mental health impacts. While you're thinking about that, as we go through this workshop, one of the big, what makes us different really is we have this model, right? And there's a lot of work that's gone into the model, and it takes 4 people to keep it going. And there's a lot of data and there's a lot of research that's gone into the model. Everyone loves En-ROADS, but actually what I find pretty unique about us is our fairly unique method of engagement. The way we communicate super complicated climate science, and particularly climate science and climate solutions, is through these interactive simulations. We are of the opinion that the only way people learn effectively is if they can roll up their sleeves and experiment, test their mental models, test their assumptions, build new mental models. And so when we run these workshops, we make sure that people are interacting with us. Every 5 minutes, they need to be doing something like you're doing right now. You're voting. They need to be voting, or they need to be making predictions, or they need to be thinking about why something happened and why it didn't happen. If we were together in a room, I would ask you to turn to the person next to you and talk to them and verbalize what you're thinking. So that's really our theory of change, is we use these interactive simulations. Okay, so, oh, that's interesting. I've not had the result before. That's interesting. So mental health, that's actually one that's unfortunately, one graph we don't have because it's just really difficult to model, is mental health. But we do have all the others. We actually have graphs on this in the model. Air pollution from particulate matter 2.5. And we have labor losses, deaths from extreme heat, crop nutrient decrease, and vector-borne diseases. So I'll be sure to show these for you, but interesting. Thank you for voting. It's interesting, the impact on mental health. I wish we had a graph on that, but what we do is very often we run a before and after poll, and before and after poll is something like, how do you feel about climate change? And the first poll is always, I'm depressed, I'm sad, I'm hopeless, I don't know what to do. And then towards the end, because of the way this workshop is structured, we end up with something like curious, learning, hopeful, a little bit more hopeful. So the arc of the workshop is we always want to leave people feeling hopeful about the future and excited to be part of the solution. Why did we develop En-ROADS? We developed En-ROADS because of this. If I walk into a group of, say, policymakers or advocates, and I ask which climate solution is the most effective and the fastest possible time frame, I get as many answers that people in the room. Everyone has a different solution. Everyone has a different assumption. And particularly with policymakers, I find, those of you who do advocacy will probably know this, but there's this mentality very often that there's just the one thing. We just all need to start driving electric vehicles. We all just need to plant trees, plant billion trees, trillion trees at scale. It's all about plant-based diets. It's all about electrification. It's all about grid permitting. It's all about phasing out coal. It's all about one thing or another. And one of the biggest takeaways from the model, as you'll see, is it takes many seeds to plant this garden. Okay, it's not the one thing. It's surprising how often we still encounter that. So we built En-ROAD. It's En-ROADS as to be a simulator for you to test these different climate solutions to see what's it actually going to take to bring us as a global community to under 2 degrees of warming, as close as possible to 1.5 degrees of warming. So you all know where we need to be. Under the baseline, which is what you're looking at, we're headed towards 3.3 degrees, which is unacceptable. So the good news, we have all these solutions. And the idea here is to give policymakers, advocates, business leaders, whoever is using the model, to give the ability to test all these different solutions and see how they all work together. There are some solutions that are ineffective on their own or less effective. There are some that are really powerful as a solution set. So, for example, transport electrification doesn't do much by itself because powering your electric vehicle with electricity made from coal doesn't do much for the environment. However, if we pair it with grid decarbonization, that's a much more powerful climate solution. And if we add storage as well, that's a winner. Okay, so what is En-ROADS? En-ROADS is a integrated assessment model. For those of you familiar what that is, it's a standalone model. So we're not a derivative any model. This is a standalone model, integrated assessment model, but it's a little bit simplified. There's nothing simple about it. I'll show you in a second this structure, but it's a little bit simplified, which means that if I change one input or variable or an assumption, all of the assumptions are transparent. I'll show you in a moment. It runs really, really fast. It's really the envy of the modeling world in terms of its speed. Most other models, if you go and change one variable or one input, it takes days, if not weeks, to come back with updated results. This one, if I were to choose a map, I was just running a workshop earlier this morning for folks in the UK. Again, if I can play this forward, and as you can see, it gives me immediate feedback. So it runs really, really, really fast. We've also translated it into 22 languages and more coming. As I said, freely available. Everything we have, we're a public institution. We are funded by philanthropies. Everything we have available is free at the point of use. When I move that slider on carbon pricing, this is what happens behind the scenes every time I move a slider. All of these things interplay. So we brought together thousands of data inputs. So in terms of like pivoting to research, right? So what research gone into the creation of this model? We use thousands of inputs from reputable sources, international organizations such as the World Bank, International Energy Agency, but we'll also use a lot of peer-reviewed scientific papers. I'll give you some examples relevant to your world. But essentially, we brought together data on population growth. That's one of the major drivers of the model. Economic growth. We have all sorts of data on food and agriculture and forestry and land use, energy, of course, energy demand, energy production, energy market prices, demand, supply, etc. And then all sorts of climate data as well, climate sensitivities, carbon sources, carbon sinks. And so we've taken all of this, there's thousands of data inputs that go into the soup. There's thousands of different differential equations that are running, but also what makes this model unique is its focus on systems thinking. When I say systems thinking, what I mean by that is, and again, this gets overlooked, particularly by policymakers, is we have feedback loops, we have time delays, we have trade-offs. This is more relevant to the investor communities. The more money we'll put into one type of solution, the less capital there's available for another solution. So trade-offs, time delays, feedback loops, rebound effects. So all of these different system dynamics that go into the model as well. So they kind of supplement all these other different equations that we have going. So this is the technical reference guide. If you want to go and take a look at, there's just so much to it. We have all these different sections here. We also compare ourselves to other models. Yeah, you just search for what you're interested in, like air pollution, and it brings you to the relevant page. Okay. So that's the model. In terms of what you're looking at, let me orient you. So we have about 180 different graphs here. And last year, the Wellcome Trust funded us to enhance our suite of features in connection with health. So we've always had biodiversity and nature-related graphs. So what the Wellcome Trust funded us, and I just wanted to show you very, very briefly. You may know some of these people. These were our scientific advisors for this project. So Carrie Nadeau at Harvard, we had Ed Maybach, has been a big fan, so at GMU, Anne's at Keck at USC, Jason there at Chapel Hill, and Sam Myers at Planetary Health Alliance. And these are our ambassadors who work in healthcare. So Andrew Garman, I mentioned at Rush, David there at Harvard Medical School, and Isabel is a climate communicator in the UK. So just want to quickly show you that. So as about 180 different impacts of climate. I'll only show you, so we have 6 maps. I mentioned we have this one. I'll actually show you in a second. This is actually a 3D atlas. Look at the North Pole. Oof, very depressing picture. And then we have, and this is what makes En-ROADS really relevant when you're talking to local policymakers. We can actually now drill down into, why am I looking at London? Let's go to Seattle as an example. Okay, so the downscaling here, each block's about 22 by 22. If you click on this triangle, it gives you a short explain as to what this graph shows. It gives you definitions. And then very helpfully, again, from a research perspective, it gives you the source. And if you click on this link, it takes you to the relevant data source. Now, maps actually come from this organization called Probable Futures. We're not a mapping outfit, we're a modeling outfit. We take maps, and then what happens is, if I were to, let's say, move one of these sliders and reduce temperature, that sends a signal back to Probable Futures. The map is dynamically updated, and they send us the output. So that's what happens. But essentially what, if I just zoom out, in this case, what you can, each map is slightly different, but this one shows days of extreme heat. And these gradations, as you know, make a huge amount of difference in terms of who is actually at risk of an injury, a heat-related injury or death, based on how many days of extreme heat they're exposed to. Here you can actually play this forward and look at it by decade, right? So right now in Seattle, we're looking at the beginning of the century, we were looking at, actually, yeah, so that's right. We were looking at about 8 to 30 days, and by the century, we're looking at about 1 to 3 months of days above 90 degrees. This one is the latest addition to our suite of impacts. This is actually if you want the technical lingo, this is a general circulation map emulator from MIT, AI powered. And again, so if I go to San Francisco, you can see this is the temperature increase. This is the temperature change. So the other map was days above 90 degrees. This one is temperature change by location. And what you can clearly observe here is obviously it's higher over land than over the oceans, because oceans have a capacity to absorb heat. This is very depressing, right? The North Pole. So yeah, so you can take a look at that. We also have other maps, so extreme humidity and heat, so wet bulb temperatures, of course, big issue there in India and Pakistan, sea level rise, drought, and wildfire danger days. Okay, so these are the maps. In terms of other health impact features, extreme frequency of extreme heat. And so this is, as I should have clarified, so this is a global model, of course. So this takes into account the average. So all of these impacts will be different, and all of you will be focused on a particular location or demographic. But so this is an average of everything. So this is India plus China plus US and all averaged. Deaths from extreme heat. We do have some features that are displayed on a regional basis. So, for example, this is deaths from extreme heat by region. I think it's very well known, the impacts in Southeast Asia. But actually, the region that's going to be most impacted outside of Southeast Asia is actually Southern Europe, right? So it's surprising to some people. And then Central Europe and Southern Africa. So I'll just run through these quickly, and then we'll do another poll in a minute. So we have outdoor labor losses from extreme heat. I use this very frequently with, first of all, conservative audiences. I don't talk about temperatures. I don't talk about Paris Agreement. I don't bring climate into it. I just say, well, you know what? And I'll give you a real example. I ran a workshop the other day for so staff working for a state senator in Ohio, and very heavily agricultural district, and a Republican member of legislature. So I just said, well, look, and actually drought wasn't the issue there. What was the issue there? Was it heat or wild? No, it was wildfire, I think I showed. So I showed something that was relevant to them in terms of impact on agriculture. Oh, yeah, that's right. I was showing wildfire, which is obviously a risk to crops. And I showed this outdoor labor loss from extreme heat. Again, this is average. And so what we typically do, there's not a feature for everyone, right? We can't satisfy everyone. We don't have features relevant to every single person. But what you can do quite easily is say, well, this is the global picture. So somebody else in the world is going to be losing 4 weeks of their income because it is too hot to work outside. For us in the US, and I'll bring other external data sources, and I'll say for us in the US or for us in Ohio, this would be like 6 days, and for somebody else on the other side of the world, be 3 months. Still, our food system is completely global. So, drought in one part of the world causes food inflation. That's a problem for everyone, for us as well. And so I just actually looked at their district and I said, we didn't have any wildfire. You guys didn't have any wildfire at the beginning of the century. Now, 2040, you're looking at additional 2 weeks. By the end of the century, you're looking at up to 4 weeks of additional wildfire risk. It's going to impact on people and crops, on nature. Are you prepared for that? What measures are you taking to get ready for that? Now, again, this is under the baseline. So we're not necessarily saying this is going to happen. This is not our prediction of the future, but this could happen. And are you getting ready for that? So we meet people where they are. Sometimes I lead with a financial argument. Sometimes I lead with a health impact argument. Sometimes I go with nature. Sometimes I go and talk about something else entirely, values-based kind of argument. But it really depends on what the audience is. Okay, I'll just finish this quickly. So what we have is then also air pollution. And there's a constant debate, including this morning. I had a friendly debate about bioenergy. Is bioenergy a solution, or is that a distraction? And people think that, in fact, that's the conversation I had this morning. In Indonesia, they're making a lot of progress on phasing out palm oil as a food component, as a component to different foods, but they are swapping that for just growing palm trees to use as feedstock to produce ethanol that they would then blend with oil imported from the US, and presumably we'll call it clean oil or something, net zero oil, which is devastating because it causes deforestation. And guess what? Whilst most air pollution from energy comes from coal, this is again global picture, this will be different in different parts of the world. So PM2.5, again, click on this triangle and it takes you to we do a lot of literature review, right? Of course, and we consult with these experts in the field. And so we've chosen this paper to be the basis of this graph, right? Anyway, so by far the largest source of PM2.5 is air pollution caused by burning of coal. But look, also bioenergy is the second biggest one. So for anyone that says bioenergy is a climate solution, I show this. We're still burning organic matter to produce fuel. How is that different to coal? Not very different at all. So yes, so just to show you the breadth of our health impact features. So we have vector-borne diseases as well, malaria and dengue caused from global warming. And this is one of my quote unquote favorite to show. And the reason why I'm showing this is because I think there's really a lack of awareness of this particular issue. I think there's a lot of awareness of air pollution. I mean, we'll see it, right? We see it in Delhi, we see it in in Shanghai. I think air pollution from energy in California for us, people living close to these Chevron refineries obviously feel it. So I feel like air pollution is a known fact. We can actually see it and smell it. Crop yield decrease from warming and crop nutrient decrease from CO2 concentration is not particularly well known. And also, even if I think about how many people in the world, billions of people rely on soybean or rice or wheat or maize as their staple daily crop that they utilize in cooking, 11% loss of nutrition in wheat by the end of the century is catastrophic. What's that going to do to child stunting? I don't know. Obviously, you're experts here, but I am guessing. I don't need to be an expert to know that there will be downstream impacts of that. So, public health crisis waiting to happen, and we are raising awareness of that. Okay, so there's a lot more that I can show you, but let's just stop here. The main focus of En-ROADS is to test climate solutions and to show materially how we can improve on these outcomes that will happen otherwise under this baseline scenario. So just to once again to level set, baseline scenario is not our prediction of the future. This is the state of the world that takes into account all progress already made on climate. So everything that we have in terms of our progress we've made with renewables deployment, like look at renewables growing, in terms of electric vehicle adoption, in terms of our investments in research and development, in terms of all the policies that are in place. The Inflation Reduction Act is included, what's left of it. So all the policies are already in place, all the corporate investments have been made, research and development. And then, purely for the purposes of experimentation, we then assume that we as a global community take no further action on climate, no further policy, no further lifestyle choices, changes to lifestyles, no further progress. This is just a starting point for experimentation. That's not our prediction of the future. All right, so what climate solutions can we test? We have on the left-hand side all the different levers in connection with energy production. This is where we get our energy from globally. Again, this will look different in California, in France, in other places in the world, in every state. This looks different, but the global picture and energy system is very global. When there's war or geopolitical instability in one country, that completely reshapes energy flows. We saw that in Ukraine. We hopefully won't see it in Venezuela, but we'll have to wait and see. So, yeah, so we have about, I would say, still about a quarter of our energy comes from coal. And by the way, coal, we're not, like, I'm sure you read in the papers from time to time, we've reached peak coal production. No, we haven't. It's actually growing between now and the end of the century. Oil is different. Oil is the most expensive type of fossil fuel. Production of it decreases towards the end of the century, but it's still alive and well until about the 60s and 70s. And by the way, there's a lot of science that goes into showing you this graph, right? We do have data sources, but we do supplement them with our own, not forecasts, but our own calculations in terms of how these types of energy compete with each other, all the market forces that determine demand and supply. Then we have gas. Again, alive and well. Many policymakers see gas as sort of transition fuel to get us to net zero. So not really phasing out that either. What we have been really good at is adding more renewable energy. And this is just going to increase, particularly with AI, we're going to have to produce more energy. So as a global community, this is the first bit of good news is we've been really, really good at adding renewable energy to our global grids. So energy supply, we can either stay at the top here or we can go really, really deep. So there's 5 ways to phase out coal. Make it more expensive to produce through regulation or actual taxation. We can start and end in different years. So there's just a lot of bells and whistles here. We can stop permitting any new coal infrastructure. We can experiment with this new innovation called carbon capture and storage. I can do a whole workshop just on CCS. What is it? How can it grow? What are the cost dynamics? What are the time delays? We can just use less coal, full stop, or we can accelerate plant retirement. So shut down those coal plants. So there's a lot here under the hood. So coal, oil, gas, bioenergy, we talked about carbon pricing. Now, I will stop here just for a second because I think people find this absolutely mind-blowing. For those of you familiar with this concept of social cost of carbon, essentially that's how much each ton of pollution is costing us in health or health outcomes or mortality from different climate impacts, insurance gap growing, loss of business confidence, dealing with cleanup costs, all of that taken in the round, social cost of carbon. Make a prediction as to what this is in En-ROADS. There's the last administration that was using the social cost of carbon in policy, the Biden administration, was using something like, I think they $80 or $90 that they were using in their decision making. $6,000 is our social cost of carbon 2026. That's how much each ton is costing us. How much are we taxing it globally? At $5. Right? You don't need to know anything else to see that there's a big gap. So this is essentially about 25% of the world economy is covered by some form of pricing or taxation mechanism. At $20, that's the average price. In California, we now tax at about $40. That's our auction price. But average is 25% at $20, that's $5 per ton. As you can see, there's a major disconnect. All right, so we've got renewables and continuing to deploy more renewables. We've got nuclear, new zero carbon. That's new technologies that haven't been invented yet. So that's your nuclear fusion, thorium-based nuclear fission, and then small modular reactors that are famously always 10 years away. Okay, so that's the production side. The consumption side, because there's always a question, how do we transition away from fossil fuels? Is it through demand side intervention or is it through supply side intervention? So you can model and see what the impact is of both sides of the equation. So transport energy efficiency, electrification, energy efficiency in transport and buildings and industry, electrification, buildings and industry, population growth, economic growth. We looked at that. And then on the right-hand side, we have nature-based solutions plus some technological carbon dioxide removal as well. So planting trees. This is where sustainable agriculture sits. We have all these different sustainable agriculture or more efficient agriculture methods, plant-based diets, reduction in food waste, elimination of waste and leakage, and then prevention of deforestation. Okay. So what would you like to test? We'll need another 3 hours to go through all of it. So we don't have time, but drop your pins. Tell me, again, this is the QR code and you have a link in the chat as well. What would you like to test? What are you curious about? We probably have time to test 2 or 3. And then with the rest of the balance of time, I'll show you what it actually takes to get to 1.5 or 2 degrees of warming. Oh, thank you for dropping that link. Thank you, Claire. So nature-based solutions, great. Planting trees. By the way, there was a proposal by Kevin McCarthy during the first Trump administration that the only climate solution that the US needs is to plant 1 trillion trees. And Maxine Joselo from Washington Post, she's now at MIT, she used En-ROADS to actually model the impact of planting 1 trillion trees, not in the US, but on a global basis. And she used outputs from En-ROADS in her article. So that's just an example of how communicators use En-ROADS. So obviously, as I said, policymakers use it, researchers use it, educators use it, but also increasingly also the media use it because of its visual nature. All right, so I've got some votes coming in. Thank you. Somebody changed their mind about trees. Okay, so economic growth. We've got DAC. Okay, that's interesting. Interesting the two of you want to talk about DAC. Renewable energy and energy efficiency in transport. Okay, great, fantastic. That gives us a lot to work with here. All right, so economic growth. Again, we don't have time to go into the detail of it, but we actually have 2 ways that you can simulate the impact of either slower or faster economic growth. And the way the conversation about AI is developing right now is the industry believes that this will boost economic growth. Okay, question mark for me, because how do you square that, but also potential mass unemployment? But anyway, so you can model higher or lower long-term economic growth, but also near-term economic growth. And you have a definition there as what that means, and the transition time between the two, but we'll stay at the top. So what do you think is going to happen to the temperature? Let me slow down economic growth, like really slow it down, bring it down to what we think is because what we also do, by the way, from the research perspective, this spectrum, the lowest to the highest, there's also a lot of science that goes into it. What is the lowest? What is the highest? And actually, the better way to demonstrate it is here with population growth. There's actually the UN proposes a range of what they consider will be a population by the end of the century. We take that range, so this is the low end of the range, the high end. We've taken the middle position. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we choose a data point somewhere in not in the middle, but somewhere else. But so we look at the potential mitigation potential of each of these technologies, and then we give you the upper and the lower limits on that, because we don't think that we can achieve, say, again, this is a good example, we don't think we can achieve 0% of our food comes from animals by the end of the century. So our lower bound is 10%. Okay, so I want you to make a prediction as to what you think is going to happen to the temperature increase. So we're 3.3 degrees right now, or 5.9 if you want. By the way, if you prefer to show this in Fahrenheit, you can. But obviously, we think in terms of the goals of the Paris Agreement, so it's 3.3. Okay, I want you to make a prediction as to by how much we can decrease this temperature by slowing down economic growth. And so is it 0.1, 0.3, 1 degree, 2 degrees, 0.7? I'll have you think about that for a second. And 0.3, okay. So I don't know how that aligns with your prediction, but the model is very sensitive to economic growth. And I think it's more, I would say probably this is probably more likely than not, than the very, very low level of reduction that I've just showed. So let's just stick with that, or maybe choose this point. The model is sensitive to economic growth because that's actually one of the key drivers. The two main drivers of this is a really, really helpful graph. I use this all the time, particularly with those people that are new to climate change, that you can explain climate change under like 60 seconds. We have population that's growing. So we're right now a happy family of about 8 billion people. We're going to be at about 10 billion and then reducing towards the end of the century. Okay. The other thing that's happening is GDP per capita is also growing. Good news and bad news. Good news, we're lifting people out of poverty in low and middle income economies. People are able to afford their first, whatever, car, house, send their child to school. Good news. Bad news, we have overconsumption in the global north. So GDP per capita is growing. Now, it takes energy to produce this GDP, right? This economic output. Energy intensity of GDP is actually falling. So that's also good news. Well, it's good news, but also one of the reasons is because increasingly more and more of our income globally comes from services, particularly financial services. So 25% of our economy in the US is financial services income, banking, insurance, real estate transactions. So we're using less and less energy to produce this GDP. And then finally, this energy also has carbon intensity. So that's essentially mix of fossil fuels and renewables on the global grid. And as you could see, we're so good at deploying renewable energy that our carbon intensity is falling. So take all of this in the round. We have a global population, we have more people on the planet, they're consuming more and more, it takes energy to produce those goods and services, and that energy has carbon intensity. The product of that is carbon dioxide emissions from energy, the biggest contributor to climate change. I find this really helpful to explain where emissions come from. Yes, we have some deforestation due to having to produce food and raise animals for food, and we have methane as well. A third of that methane comes from agriculture. We have some other emissions, but really by far the biggest chunk is fossil fuel carbon dioxide. All right, so that's why slowing down economic growth or indeed accelerating economic growth has that impact on the economy. So that's I'm gonna stack these ultimately, but let's just test them one by one. So direct air capture, you want to take a look at direct air capture. Okay, so, and by the way, we have other types as well. Like if you're interested in like enhanced mineralization, we have that as well. But let's just stay at the top. So direct air capture. So these are large machines. The only country that are really trying to scale this technology right now is Switzerland. Climeworks is a big unicorn over there. So they are the leader in big machines. They take carbon out of, they suck this carbon out of the atmosphere, put them through this filter, and then hopefully they do something with that carbon dioxide as well. They inject it into something like carbon. So that technology, I mean, I think there's a lot of hope that it proves to be a big climate lever. I will ask you to make a prediction. If I run this, if I move this all the way to the right, so like max out on tech CDR, we do nothing else, no other policies, what's going to happen to the temperature increase? I'm going to let you think about that for a second. And off we go. 0.1, not much at all. Number of reasons for that. One is that there's actually a very small concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So you have to suck up a lot of that. You have to put a lot of air through that machine. It obviously uses an enormous amount of energy. Where are you going to find that energy? Is it going to be additional? Is it going to be clean? Question mark around that. And also, because of the inefficiency of these machines, at least for now, you're going to have to install them all over the world, and so many of them. At the same time, we have a population that's growing, right? And incomes are growing. So what's the impact of that? We're going to have to grow more crops. We're going to have to rear more animals, because also we know when incomes grow, people add more meat to their diet. So where all these different stresses on land, I've just mentioned Indonesia going all in on growing palm trees to create fuel. So we have that stressor on land as well. So we have all these different competing demands on land, where we're going to find all this, additional land to put these pieces of equipment on. And also look at the cost. Even with the maximum support and deployment, it's really still expensive. And even towards the end of the century, it's still like $436 per ton. And I know I'm not giving you like a comparator, but still, just intuitively, you can see the economies of scale are not quite there compared to something like renewables that have been plummeting, cheaper source of electricity, right? So in terms of its cost dynamics, it doesn't look all that promising. Okay, so we've done this, we've economic growth. Let's test renewables. This is really going to surprise you. So I'm sorry, I apologize. So in the model again, so what you can do is you can test a subsidy, renewable energy subsidy. So this is to produce more electricity from renewable energy sources, deploy more solar farms and wind farms and geothermal. We actually model them separately, and then we combine them in this one green slice. So you can go all the way to up to 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So the Inflation Reduction Act, the production tax credit there was about 5 cents. So this is basically every country in the world introduces Inflation Reduction Act and some, but that's the only policy we have. So I'm going to move this slide. I'm going to ask you to make a prediction as to what's going to happen to the temperature, by how much we can reduce it, 0.1, 0.3, 0.5, 0.6, 1 degree. This always surprises people. Why not more of a difference, right? You're probably asking yourselves. Well, actually, one of the reasons is I showed you renewables are such a success already that, and I know, again, this is different in every country. If you have a small project in Africa crying out for capital, you'll say, oh, this graph doesn't look as favorable to me, but renewables are just so far away. I showed you the how in terms of it competes with other types of, and you can look at all these different market prices. But overall, I mean, look, we're already such a success story. Look how far it is from oil. Oil's so expensive and just continues to, the cost continues to increase. Renewables is such a success already. that optimizing for it or subsidizing it even more doesn't make more of a difference. The other reason why it gets overlooked, and this is where system dynamics comes in, what is renewable energy actually used to produce? Electricity. It's not a direct substitute for gas that you have in your ICE vehicle, not you, but one, in your ICE vehicle. It's not a direct substitute for maritime oil. It's not a direct substitute for aviation fuel. So it doesn't compete with oil. So it does help squeeze out coal and gas, but not oil. And again, it doesn't really, you still have to phase out these fossil fuels. It's not enough to just subsidize renewable energy. It doesn't have enough of a substitution or displacement effect. Okay, so in the interest of time, so you also wanted to test energy efficiency in transport. What that actually means, it's mode switching, it's public transit, it's those interventions. Let's move, well, again, make a prediction. What's going to happen? I think you know the drill by now. It helps by 0.1, okay? It doesn't help more. Again, this will be different. In California, the biggest source of emissions is transportation. So for us, it would make more of a difference. But energy efficiency actually is an enormously impactful intervention and gets overlooked. The impact is much bigger in buildings and industry, though. So massive, massive benefit because of, again, population is growing. Where is it growing? It's growing in cities. We're building more cities. So let's make cities more energy efficient so we don't have to retrofit those buildings 5 decades down the line. It's very expensive. So let's see, what do we have? We've invested in DAC. That's not enough. Slow down economic growth. That helps. Energy efficiency in transport helps a little bit more. Renewables helps a little bit more. That only gets us to 2.8. Okay. So what else do we need to do? As I said, this gets overlooked and forgotten. We actually need policies on equitable, I will add, phase out of fossil fuels. Adding renewables just doesn't do it. It's not enough. My prediction is coal will be able to phase out fairly quickly just because it's expensive. Well, I say that. Frustratingly, India continues to produce a lot of electricity from coal. Indonesia still hasn't. But I think the prediction on the forecast for coal is positive. Oil less so, gas even less so. But let's say it looks something like this. Let's leave bioenergy alone. Let's up our ambition on carbon pricing. Very important. The challenge with it, though, is it is very politically difficult because it adds to the cost of energy that's passed on to consumers. So that's the challenge with it. That's why we're stuck at $5. What else do we need to do? We need to electrify everything if we were to set up this renewable energy for success. And we need to invest in energy efficiency. We're getting close. Yes, we do need nature-based solutions, planting trees, absolutely. Prevention of deforestation as well, very important. Oh, see, we're now 2 degrees. We can actually get to 1.5. It'll require everything at this point. We can get to 1.5. I don't think 1.5 is achievable right now, but politically, not physically. Physically, it's possible, and financially even it's possible. But let's just stop there. 2 degrees. Okay, so by how much is it helping us? So what you can do, you can either toggle between, this is the baseline. So this is, let's go somewhere else in the States. Let's go, I don't know, West Virginia. So this is the baseline. The world, so under this scenario, the world is warming overall, so an average of 3.3. Virginia is warming at 4 degrees. Under 2 degrees of warming, that's this scenario I've just built. Let's just make it a little bit more ambitious. Say we make a dent in agriculture and reduce waste and leakage, circular economy, etc., etc. So, and this is under 1.7, so we can make great improvements there. Let's see how many people we've saved from deaths from extreme heat. We've sort of, it's probably a third of what it would have been otherwise. Let's see how we're bending the curve on. Oh, this is my favorite thing to show actually. Air pollution from energy. You know this. One of the dynamics in the model is, what's really useful to see is how fast, how quickly lines diverge. So, some lines, you'll see the black line and the blue line, the baseline in the current scenario. It takes them decades to start departing. Air pollution, as you can see, drops immediately. So when we improve and increase carbon pricing, as you can see, it's very, very effective. Air pollution, and we saw that during the pandemic, right? Air pollution cleaned up so fast when we took those cars off the road and planes out of the sky. So that's obviously a great success story. So air pollution from energy can make enormous difference with more ambitious action on climate. People still will be losing 2 weeks of their income because it's too hot, but it's halving of that otherwise, look, it's just exponential, right? What else have we done? That's an enormous improvement, right? From 11% loss of nutrients in wheat to 1.7. So I'm gonna leave some time for questions, but the upshot here is no, there isn't such a thing as just we need one of these. Actually, I was talking to a policymaker in Minnesota, and he said the entire caucus at the state legislature is convinced that the only climate solution they need is nuclear, more nuclear. So you can see that that's definitely not the case, right? For all the reasons we can talk about. But so it takes many seeds to plant this garden. It's still possible to get to 1.5, certainly to 2 degrees physically. It'll take every single solution. Some are more impactful than others. Some are cheaper than others. Some are more proven than others, like Tech CDR we're still at this point making a big bet that's going to pay off. Others, like energy efficiency in buildings, my God, we've had this for decades. We know how it works. We have all the tools, and it's a scaled and commercialized solution. And yes, we can still make an enormous progress on these different metrics that you care about. All right, one last thing I will say is, this is actually a cool feature. So the scenario we've just built, it creates a unique URL for each of these combination of different actions, and you can share this. I'll copy the scenario link, and I'm just dropping in the chat. And yeah, so you can share that with folks, with your colleagues. One last thing I will say is we have a whole free training platform called Mastering En-ROADS, where you can immerse yourself in the minutiae of energy system. But also what we do is we teach advanced facilitation techniques, things like what we've been doing right now, utilizing polling, asking people to make a prediction, visualizing the outputs of people's, not outputs, but visualizing impacts, and doing this in real time together. And I think it works really, really well as a communication method. And yes, so I think I'll stop here, and then we have 6 minutes of questions. I see one question: how does an increase in nuclear change it? Increase in nuclear, I guess change the temperature increase. So nuclear, let me start a new tab, and then I can show you. The challenge of nuclear is that, well, cost is one. So again, we saw from marginal cost of electricity production. So nuclear is this line in the middle. We just compare and contrast it to wind and solar, right? The challenge of nuclear, and we use this interesting metric called progress ratio. This is all the assumptions that we have in the model, and it's been moved once again, which means I can't find it. Oh, energy supply progress rate. There you go. So this is a metric that essentially translates, if we double deployment of a particular technology or energy source, if a double deployment, by how much does cost drop? Because there's a positive feedback loop. The more we deploy, the more we learn from deployment, the cheaper it becomes, the more we deploy, and so off it goes, one of the system dynamics. So for renewables, it's 0.8, which means every time we double deployment of renewables, cost drops by 20%. For nuclear, it's 2%. We've extracted all economies of scale from deployment of nuclear. It's just not going to drop. I see it under the baseline. even if we were to subsidize it to the extent that it's like maximum subsidy that we think cents per kilowatt hour, that's kind of the maximum that the market would bear, it still doesn't even compete with wind and solar, right? It doesn't, because wind and solar, modular, easy to deploy, just, manufacturing costs are so low. So we don't think that nuclear is going to be. Now, that's not to say from the policy design perspective, and we don't prescribe policy design, but that's not to say that we shouldn't utilize resources we already have for as long as we can, bearing in mind all the issues around water consumption and nuclear waste. But building new nuclear plants just does not make sense right now given this set of economic factors and parameters. So, all right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see what other questions you have. What is the impact of all these data centers? Okay, there's always a question about AI. All right, so let me show you, and I think I touched on it earlier. This data set, this graph is based on a number of data sets. This one is the most commonly used one, so International Energy Agency. The data is up to the end of 2023. When did ChatGPT become a big thing? 2022. In 2023, we weren't really talking about AI in the same way we're talking about it right now. So we're about 2/3 of the way through of updating this graph to take into account how much additional energy we will have to produce in order to power these data centers that drive AI. Now, one thing I will say is the forecasts on that are wild. We will have to produce 5% more to all the way, we have triple. I'm exaggerating, of course, but there's a lot of different views, and that's exactly what we're doing. Like right now, we're looking at literature, doing literature review and talking to experts in the field to say, well, how will this graph change once we've incorporated the use of AI? Now, another factor that is happening, we talked about energy efficiency. These data centers are becoming more and more energy efficient day by day, enormous improvements. So we're going to have two effects. One is a lot more energy production, but also enormous improvements in energy efficiency. We'll see where those two net out and what this does to the temperature increase. So come back in a couple of months' time. I think right now we're aiming for April or May release. Another thing you can do as well, you can sign up to, every month we host webinars, and you can monitor and see, once we know when we're rolling out these new features for AI, we'll announce that proudly to the world, and we'll have a launch webinar as well. But this is the link, webinars. Okay, hopefully I answered that question. All right, well, again, I hope you see this as a way that you can communicate your research findings in a slightly different way, more engaging way, perhaps, than is typically the norm. Even if we don't have a graph for something, you can still lead with, this is the air pollution from energy, from production of energy, PM 2.5. I've showed you the graph, we played around with the model. Let me tell you about this particular finding that I'm focused on energy efficiency in a particular state or region or whatever that may be. You can bring in other research findings, but it's just use this En-ROADS workshop as a way to convey information in a slightly more engaging way. All right, 1 minute. Anyone else has any other questions that I haven't addressed? Oh, thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it. Please use them. Please use the model, as I said, freely available. It's also, if you educators, a great educational tool. I use it myself. I teach a class at UCLA Extension. I use it with my own students. Just very different kind of education.
I had a question.
Yeah.
When I looked at the map, it said that, like, when I looked at the map for where I live, and it talked about heat days over, it was basically close to 80 degrees, 78 degrees Fahrenheit. It had almost none, except for like certain areas, but we have many days already over 78 degrees.
Okay, so are you talking about extreme heat days?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, let's go and check it out. So, all right, so let's go. So at the beginning of the century, we were looking at 8 to 30 days. So this is a position as of now. So we have, well, unfortunately, 2026 are kind of in between these two. But yeah, so what we're saying right now, in your region, you should be experiencing 8 to 30 days of days above 90.
Interesting. We
yeah.
had like 0. I don't know what. And I was flipping back and forth between baseline, and I don't know if it was that exact one as extreme heat days or it was something else, but
Yeah. So essentially for you, I think what under the baseline, and again, this is not, they're better, more refined maps. I mean, we use this more just to
Yeah.
start a conversation. So you will have
Right.
much more, in fact, I know the state of Washington will have a lot more better maps, but
Oh,
just to
the
show,
one I was looking at had 78 degrees, not 90 degrees.
78 degrees.
Yeah, maybe
So
it
this
was a
shows,
different.
okay,
It
so
wasn't
maybe,
extreme heat. Maybe it was a different metric.
maybe temperature change is different. That's the only one we have. But yeah,
It's
so
like
basically what
78.
we're saying is there's a risk of that flipping into exceeding 30 days and going into the sort of 31 to 90 degrees territory.
It was
So,
a wet bulb or it was a bulb.
oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure that well bulb temperatures would be an issue though in the States as
No, it
much.
didn't say wet bulb. It just said like heat. It just said humid
Yeah.
and 78
Yeah.
degrees.
So it has
But
to
it
be
didn't
both.
say what the humidity was.
Yeah. So it has to be both, right? So this is essentially, yes, days above 26 or 78 wet bulb temperature. That's right. So
Okay.
it's not really a problem for your state because you have heat, but you don't have humidity at this point. So this only applies.
Oof, we do have humidity.
Well, you do, but not to the extent that this graph is defined, I guess.
Yeah.
It's really, what it's really showing is places like Pakistan and Indonesia where you have those.
Well, in central US, if you go back to the US, it
Yeah.
had
Mhm.
like a lot of the US, like southeast
Yeah.
and the
So,
Midwest and the
Louisiana.
Midwest.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good point. Yes, you're right.
It doesn't tell you what the humidity is that they're using in that, so it was a little maybe it when you click on
I think that's the explainer. So 26C with 100% humidity and humidity
it's
combination.
100% humidity.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So that's the explainer. Yep. Great
Cool.
question. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I hope this was helpful. Keep in touch. If there's anything else we can do, if you'd like to bring us into your community, we're a nonprofit. We're for now well funded, so we can do this without any friction, contracts, etc., compensation. So if this would be helpful for your networks and communities and organizations you work for, let us know. We'll be there.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Have a great afternoon and evening,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Take care.
We
Bye-bye.
appreciate it.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.